is it possible, this is a late night thought, but I thought, is it possible that we can future-proof ourselves? I mean, at some stage we're all going to pass on, that's an inevitable fact. But is it possible that we can future-proof ourselves? And the answer is absolutely yes. And we do that every time that we make an impact, or every time we make a difference in somebody's life, because that impact may have lasting generational effect. Now, I want to share a personal story. It's a story that dates back years ago. It's when I was in 4th grade, and Mrs. Black, my 4th grade teacher, I remember this vividly. She was explaining that we would be having an art project, and that we would each be given a ball of clay. And we would be able to sculpt that ball of clay. She gave us 2 weeks to think about, however, what mattered most to us in our life. Well, the day of the project came, and we were all issued a ball of clay. And she continued to say, she continued her instruction, that is, and she said, we'll have 2 hours to sculpt, and at any time when you're finished with your project, you can go out and play on the playground. Well, to a bunch of 10-year-olds, that was an open invitation for kids to just roll out a snake, and they were out of there. And half the group immediately left. I mean, it was just half the kids. Snakes and snails were very popular that day. But the other half of us, we were really quite dedicated to our project. And I spent the entire 2 hours on what mattered absolutely most to me. And I remember when the 2 hours was up, I remember sitting there in front of my creation, and I was so proud of what I had done. And I was just waiting for Mrs. Black as she walked up and down each of the aisles, commenting and congratulating each of the kids on their snails and their snakes and their other projects. When she got to me, I was beaming because I had created something that I felt was so important. And to a 10-year-old boy, what was it that I sculpted? Well, I sculpted a hamburger and French fries. It was so important to me. But that was no ordinary hamburger and French fries. That bun is removable. You can move it up. You can remove it. So was the lesson of what matters most lost on this 10-year-old boy? Not entirely. You see, the lesson that I was going to receive that day was about to happen. Mrs. Black tapped me on the shoulder and she said to me, "Could you please stay after class?" Sure. So all of the kids left, and I remember as I was still just admiring, my creation, I remember she came up to me and she got down on her knee, and we were both just looking at my cheeseburger and fries. And she grabbed my hand. I remember like it was yesterday. She grabbed my hand, she looked straight into my eye, and she said, "Baron, do you know you can do anything you set your mind to?" And when she said it with such conviction, with such sincerity, with such confidence, that it actually pierced into my soul. And I remember as she was saying that, I was just nodding my head and I was saying, "Yes, Mrs. Black, I believe that." Don't you love my burger and fries? I believe that. But the reality is, her words that day has left a legacy on me. And 30 years later, Mrs. Black, I believe that. Now, I have talked, over the years, I've talked to a lot of my friends, and many of them had Mrs. Black for a 4th grade teacher as well. And actually, to find out, many of those students had similar one-on-one moments at different stages of their 4th grade experience. So you can imagine the legacy, the future proof that she gave on her life and the people that she touched. So her personality, her warm personality, her sincerity, but more so, her tangible skill of inspiring her students. My question is, where did that come from? Where did Mrs. Black learn the ability to inspire her students? Oftentimes we hear the word when we have the privilege of experiencing people's talents, like those dancers, or the poets, or all of these speakers. When we observe and we are impacted by people's talents, oftentimes we throw out the word, "Oh my gosh, they're a natural. They're just a natural." But stop and think about what that word means. They're a natural. Now, when we talk about personalities, the people we become, the people we are, when we talk about different skills that we have, whether it be the skill Mrs. Black had, or whether it be a skill in sports or music or whatnot, when we think about skills and things, there's a lot of discussion on where our skills come from and where our personalities come from. But let me just share a recent discussion. Many of you are familiar with the author Malcolm Gladwell. He's written Outliers, Tipping Point, several books, just a brilliant author. And in Outliers, he introduces us to the term of the 10,000-hour rule. And in the 10,000-hour rule, he explains that it takes approximately 10,000 hours of hard work to master any cognitively demanding activity. It makes sense, right? Practice makes perfect. And there is I believe that to an extent. However, there is David Epstein, who about 6 weeks ago wrote an article saying, no. 10,000 hours is really important, and practice can make a lot of people really good, but, he says, it's all in the genes. There is a reason why tall people are good at basketball. There is a reason why Jamaicans are good at high jump. There's a reason why Kenyans are good at running. He says it's all in the genes, and he writes a very convincing case of why it's, in the genes. And there's a lot of other theories. In the psychological schools of thought, there's lots of theories about where our personalities come from. There's psychological schools of thought that says when you're born, with some serious problems, some subconscious, things that are going on in your mind. And through our experiences and our life journeys, we learn and we grow and we fix a lot of those issues that we had at birth. Now, if society's going to fix us, whoa. But then there's other psychological schools of thought that says when we're born pure, and it's society that can have a damaging effect on our personalities. And there's some truth to that. There's actually some threads of truth to both theories, but that also leads to a very victim mentality. But then there's probably the most popular, and it's the behaviorist theory. And the behaviorists believe that we are born neutral, and we develop a positive or negative life orientation based upon our experiences. Now, this is one of the most widely accepted beliefs of where our personality came from. We're born neutral, and it's life's experiences that shape us. And you can see why that's pretty popular. But as popular and widely accepted as that is, this is the theory I have the biggest issue with. And the reason is the word that starts with an N, neutral. I do not believe for one moment that any of us were born neutral. That the terminology is tabula rasa, which means a blank slate. None of us were born a blank slate. I even go as far as to believe that when we were born with our personalities completely intact. What? Let me explain this. I believe that when we were born, each one of us was born with an innate personality at birth. Now, it wasn't developed, and trust me, as we go throughout life, our personality will continue to grow and develop, and through these experiences of life, we'll continue to, cultivate and mold that personality. But I believe firmly there is a starting point. When, for example, baby Sam here, this is he's so cute, isn't he? So when baby Sam was born just a few months ago, he was born, this is an analogy to kind of help you understand what I'm meaning by innate personality. When Sam was born, he was born with his arms and legs completely intact. They weren't developed. He didn't know how to use them, but they were there. And what I believe is our personalities are also intact. We do have a starting point. And to kind of really understand how this isn't so far out there, let's just take a quick audience poll. If you are in a family and you have more than one sibling, like more than one brother and sister, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Keep them up nice and high. Okay. Most of the audience, keep them up, okay? Because it's you I want to ask a question to, all right? If we were born a blank slate, that means we're all born the same to begin with, right? We're born neutral, tabula rasa. My question to all of you who have more than one brother and sister is, keep your hand up if you believe that you were born exactly the same as your sibling. Keep your hand up if you believe that. Okay, not one hand. My sister has 5 kids. Same house, same mom and dad, same food, same schooling, a lot of them the same clothing that were just handed down and handed down. Poor kids. But anyway, each of these kids, we could tell from a very, very early age that these kids had a completely different and unique personality. And they were testing mom and dad, you trust me, they were really testing their personalities out. Well, it's the same thing with us, but more so, not just our personality, but I believe that we have innate skills like the one that Mrs. Black had to naturally instill and inspire her students. It was not learned. The reality is, each of you have innate skills as well. And when we think about skills, we oftentimes, natural skills, we think of prodigies. For example, the 3-year-old little girl that rocks up to a piano and suddenly is playing Rachmaninoff, and mom and dad are like, oh, get her on Oprah quick. And then, we think of the little, the 4-year-old that's memorized the phone book or whatever. Those are grand, innate skills, absolutely. But I want to focus, and I want you to focus more so on the everyday skills that each of us have. So we're going to have a little bit of fun at my expense. So my parents asked me, what do you want for Christmas? And boy, I had a long list of action figures I wanted. But I said, Mom, Dad, look, if we can't afford it, don't get me any action figures. What I want most, what I want more than anything else is a filing cabinet. And much to my parents' dismay, they bought me a file cabinet. And a few weeks later was my birthday, and all I wanted was a labeler. I was completely happy with my labeler and my file cabinet as a 12-year-old boy. And what I used to do is I used to take my parents' bills and their mess and their stacks of papers, and I used to just go through and categorize and organize them into color-coded files that had labels on them. And I just loved doing it at 12 years old. I know. Again, I said we were going to have some fun at my expense, but the reality is, and this is where I get serious, the reality is that skill was innate. I didn't learn that organizational skill. It was just something that I was really good at. I didn't request it. In fact, I've actually had to control it. So basically, but that skill that I had has actually become a very valuable business asset for the companies I've worked for. And I've absolutely loved to sink my teeth when people say, oh my gosh, what a mess we've got. I'm like, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. Give me your mess, give me your chaos, and leave me alone for about an hour. So that skill, which is the second point that I want to make, is when you have a skill, don't discount it. Big or small, each one of you are innately good at something. Look to the person right next to you, any one of them. So everybody look to the person next to you for a moment, okay? Lock eyes with one other person. While you're looking at them, I want you to take a very, I don't know what's happening back in this section, but they're having fun. Okay. It's true love. There's going to be another proposal here, people. Okay, so look into their eyes. And do you know what the beautiful thing about it is? That person that you're looking at right now, has a skill that they can do, or skills that they can do better than probably anybody else in this room. That's how brilliant the possibilities are. All right, so we're talking about innate personalities. So when I often get the question, well, do you believe that leaders are born, or do you believe that leaders are made? Well, you would think that I would just simply say they are born. And the reality is there are born leaders out there. There are people that I've had 2 managers, and several that I haven't, but I've had 2 particular managers, actually, no, I've had about a dozen managers that had that gift of leadership. And I would walk to the end of wherever they were going because they had that just natural, innate ability to rally a group and move toward a common cause. That being said, I've had other managers who, while the skill wasn't innate, through work and through hard effort, they have absolutely developed some fabulous leadership skills. So the reality is leaders can be born. There are born leaders out there, and you'll know them. They'll resonate. And there are earned leaders, and you will know, recognize, and appreciate their talents as well. So in closing, I want to invite you first to plant the seed. If you have doubt, at least plant the seed of possibility that when you are born with an innate, grand self. And then, 1, discover that innate self. Look for things that you're good at. Look for things that you just gravitate to, and be proud of those. Now, if you have lots of skills, but you're frustrated because you just don't know. William Shakespeare had a great saying, and he said, "Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and others have greatness thrust upon them." Great quote. You'll get there. Don't get frustrated. But second of all, put those skills to work. Share your skills and gifts and personality with others, just as Mrs. Black did for me, just as I believe John did for Jeremy Little, just as many of these inspirational people today have spoken on people that have made an impact, legacy, and future-proof their life. And third is recognize and appreciate the gifts and skills of other people. And as the second speaker, I think it was Daniel Elison said, which I loved, when he was referring to the population, he said there are 7 billion futures out there waiting to happen. The possibility is endless. And who knows, next time you see a little girl or a little boy running down the grocery aisle in a superhero cape, just stop and think to yourself that that person may actually be the next generation's superhero. Thank you.